he'd gone back and forth a couple of rounds with these questions, and toward the end, he laid his final defense with, "Look, the practice of law is a plantation system, and you're all very well paid." So the punch in the stomach for me was, unfortunately, I was looking at my newly acquired Rolex at the moment that he said that, because I wondered when lunch was, and as that visual was just, as I'm looking at the new Rolex, and he said that, and that registered, that punch in the gut, kind of registered like, oh yeah, here's the evidence. He's right.
Hello, and welcome to episode 28 of the Mindful Wealth podcast. In this part 2 of our discussion with Paul Knowlton and Aaron Hedges, we get a little bit more into some of their ideas about economic mutuality as opposed to what they describe as the plantation system. Drawing from their book, Better Capitalism, please enjoy this conversation with Aaron and Paul.
I want to touch real quick, Paul. You said you're an attorney, and I know that you both have MDivs, right? Master of Divinity. Mm-hmm. And Paul, in the book, you explain a moment in your career, your early moment in your legal career when you were an associate and a partner at your law firm explained, this is a plantation system. First, ugly term, full stop. Second, can you tell us what he meant and how that affected your path?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Jonathan. So I've been transparent about that story, starting with the book, because it was such a powerful moment for me. We were in a what's called a Am Law 200 firm, a large law firm. We were having an annual meeting. The associates had come in from all around, and we were given the happy news by the managing partner that the partnership had given us all raises. And anybody who spent a few minutes in a law firm or other, maybe a CPA firm, after your billable hours, after your salary gets increased, your billable hour requirements are going to get increased. So a number of associates, those who were there mostly long before I was, started to raise hands, right? It's like, thank you for the salary. We really don't want the additional income. You can keep it. We'd like to not increase our hours. We're already putting in 1,800 or so hours, and that's billable hours. To get 1,800 billable hours out, you got to put in 21 or 2,200 hours. So that's literally the 80 to 100 hour a week, an hour a week. So he'd gone back and forth a couple of rounds with these questions, and toward the end, he laid his final defense with, "Look, the practice of law is a plantation system, and you're all very well paid." So the punch in the stomach for me was, unfortunately, I was looking at my newly acquired Rolex at the moment that he said that, because I wondered when lunch was, and as that visual was just, as I'm looking at the new Rolex, and he said that, and that registered, that punch in the gut, kind of registered like, oh yeah, here's the evidence. He's right. And I had the sense right then, Jonathan, that he and Terry, he was not talking about the American slavery system. He was not talking about that offense. This was something bigger. I didn't understand it at the moment, but it was something bigger. This was a smart attorney. I knew him to be very well read. He is a corporate attorney, and just a smart guy, but that's not what he meant. He meant something bigger. And that led me into kind of unpacking over the years. What did he mean by that? And then I came to understand this is a short term for just exploitation at sort of every level. So you can have a plantation system where you're literally abusing the land or the minerals, the crops, the people, any way you want to kind of couch an economically abusive system is how we're framing this partnership economics. Yeah. So that was quite a punch in the nose at the, and gut at the same time. That is what led us to that. And that also then, obviously was the what we incorporated in the title of the book. And then we unpacked that so that people don't think that this was a race-based issue or a race-based kind of consideration. It wasn't. In fact, I'm first generation Cuban, and I was probably one of though there were a few other potentially minorities in that group, we were all pretty much lily white. I mean, that was not, so that was helped me also understand that this concept of plantation economics, that is universal. It really is.
Right. And even those who may appear to be like at the top of the ladder, meaning an attorney, right, that's a high-end professional, people who are admired, that's how deep it goes, right? That's what Paul's story always makes me think of. Even there, we think of this elevated, lofty spot. This exploitative mindset, is so pervasive.
In a way, too, if there can be some sympathy for this particular partner, he's trapped in that system also. He had other people at the partnership table, which he may or may not have agreed with. I don't know. But he's the one who got to deliver the message, and he's the one who got to get the pushback from the associates. And so I think we're all trapped, whether we recognize it or not. We're all trapped in this system until we can pull ourselves out.
I think the image of you looking at your Rolex, waiting for lunch, when you get that message, sort of sums that up. We are all trapped in this exploitative system.
It's my little, my little handcuff right there. Yes. Yeah.
Go ahead, Terry.
Okay. So if now we're going to shift gears a little bit, and, I think you've laid out for us, the idea of mutual benefit and plantation economics. And then you kind of move to talk about the form you would like to transition out of, what we're moving towards. Could you maybe define that for us briefly and tell us about the basic tenets of partnership economics?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one way we sum it up is, that the ethic is to, well, in a corporate sense, to sustain profitability for all stakeholders. It's a pretty short definition, but every word kind of counts. Sustain profitability, yes, profitable, and for all stakeholders. And so it doesn't have to be at odds with the Friedman thing we've talked about, but it does at least have a different emphasis on, it's not maximizing, right, but sustaining profitability for all stakeholders. So that we could unpack that more, but in a corporate sense, in a nutshell, that's how we would articulate a partnership corporate ethic.
And coupled with that is this both and perspective of interest. So it's not my interest solely, and it's not your interest solely. It's not the distorted Ayn Rand view, and it's not the distorted Jesus view. It's self and other. So I need to have, really ideally, if we want to think about Adam Smith's construct of the impartial spectator, it's that person standing off to the side as you and I negotiate a deal, and how is that person viewing our negotiation? Is everyone in a better position when that deal's over, or is one side clearly overweighted, right? Is one side clearly at advantage and the other's at a disadvantage? We want to see this shift in thinking. We want to see this shift in theological thinking, because from that perspective, from our theology, from our philosophy, everything flows, right? Our words, our actions, and the consequences thereof it. And so that partnership economics, hopefully we think the word's clear enough, but I need to have my need in mind, and I really do need to have the other person's need in mind. Hopefully both people are transparent enough that we can have that open dialogue about needs and interests and how we can mutually benefit each other. That will take some time, right? That's an individual challenge, person to person, about being transparent. And trust, that's a big word these days in leadership and management, right? And trust at all different levels of the organization. We offer a little litmus test in the book. It's three pieces, three elements of our litmus test for trust. Is the other person transparent? Do they typically make good decisions? Most days, most of the time. And do they have my interest at heart? They don't have to agree with me. Eventually, they don't have to make a deal with me, right? They don't have to deal with me if they don't want to. But if we're going to deal with each other, do they at least have my interest at heart? Or do they have a cannibalist lust, to steal a line from Rand? We want to help change that ethic. So that leads us to the plantation model. Mm-hmm. Sorry, away from the plantation model.
Away
to
from,
the
away.
Yeah.
But like, what are, this, like, I think this is a good, like, high level definition of what you're talking about, but like, what are some of the levels, like maybe like the levers, like if I could be practical, like what are some of the things that like one could tangibly do to move in that direction?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, there's we could do some starters. There's so much more to be done. We try to kind of address it in, 4 different economic arenas, I guess. The business arena, the arena of professions, the arena of government, which has a part to play. It's not everything, but a part to play economically. And then culturally, all these things bear on how economics happen. And we could get even more specific on some of those. The cultural one is maybe a place to start. It's a hard place to start because it's a very uphill climb. But we're persuaded by the Peter Drucker thing that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and certainly a lot of other business leaders have echoed that and say you can have whatever policies you want, but people are going to do what the culture of their company or of their nation suggests. And part of that goes back to the idea of enough. And culturally, is enough something that we value? Or is that a virtue? To have enough. Or do we just want more and more and more? Another cultural aspect that we harp on somewhat in the book is this idea that we are they. It's so easy to point fingers. Those politicians, right? What a mess they are making. Or those CEOs of those big corporations. What they're just doing things terribly. But we are in a democracy. And so whoever is in office, we, the people, collectively put them there. It doesn't mean every single one of us voted for everyone that won, but instead of pointing the finger, we might need to kind of look in the mirror and say, what is our part in this? Are we electing good people? Are we even getting good candidates into the election, so that there are good choices when the election comes around? That's a cultural thing that it's not they, right? It's we are they. And with corporations, I think culturally, we just have this, we're very far from what it should be culturally. But I remember the first time that I read in a corporate governance book that corporations are owned by the shareholders. I was like, wait, what? That blew my mind because I thought the CEOs owned the corporations. And when you read business news, that's what it sounds like, and you could probably look on business news today and say, oh, the CEO such and such gave shareholders a chance to meet with him or her. That's so backwards. The shareholders are the owners. The CEO works for the shareholders. But we don't think about it that way. Mm-hmm. We've made an idol out of the CEO who, is this, philosopher king, who the conqueror of all things, but they're an employee of the shareholders. But again, it's so easy to point the finger and, in my email, when I get a chance to vote on the companies that I invest in, do I even do that? It's so easy to do that most people don't vote on shareholder proxies when we get them in the mail or email. So there's some mindsets there culturally where it's, oh, that's us. I'm a part owner of Google. I'm a part owner of Exxon. And most of us are, whether through individual investing or through our 401k. If you own an index fund, it's not they, but we are in fact the owners of these corporations that it's so easy to complain about.
So, Aaron, is individual ambition inherently part of plantation economics, or can I seek personal wealth and personal advancement and achievement and fit that into a model where, it sounds like you're suggesting we really have to check our own. And I don't disagree with you. I'm not saying I disagree, but we have to check our own ambitions. How do we then also pursue that ambitions in partnership economics?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I agree with what Paul said, that it's a both and. It's where do my interests also align with somebody with whom I could do business? I could make an exchange. I could build a company. Let's say I'm the owner of a company. I want the company to be profitable. And maybe I need employees who are happy, to then have a profitable company. So it, in a holistic sense, it's both. It's both. Another question I like to ask is, kind of in light of the Milton Friedman ethic, if you want to maximize profit, when are you talking about? Because if you mean like right this moment, well, let's liquidate the company and maximize profit. That's not what almost anybody means when they say, they want to be valuable when they retire or when their kids go to college or whenever, unless it's this exact moment, any point in the future that you want to have value means you got to work with other people. You have to align so that value exists beyond the present moment. And so it just involves zooming out a little bit. It's not one or the other. It's not negating. It's just how is my part of it part of something a little bigger than me that can in fact benefit me, I would say should benefit me, along with other people now and into my future and into their future.
And I'd like to add to that the additional thought. The idea of rewarding the CEO or rewarding the visionary, right? So, Jonathan, we don't want to hold back anybody who's got a vision for building and for driving, right? We need builders. We need the visionaries of the world. So give them the support they need. Give them the tools they need. There's not holding back on them, and they shouldn't be held back. The ethic, though, for them needs to be early on. It's not about them only, right? They can't do all that they want to accomplish of and by themselves. They've got to get other people involved. It's back to the object lesson. We're all here in the same world. So there's a balance here where they've got to recognize that, okay, even if they're out front, even if they're the leader, they don't get all of the rewards because really they're not taking all of the risks. They're taking some of the risk, but they're not taking all of the risk. So a tech company here in Atlanta sold not too long ago, a well-known name. The two founders or three founders maybe cashed out with more money than they'll need for generations. And I have a friend who works there, and I thought, oh, great, he's going to get a nice little, bump for this sale. He got very little. Behind the scenes, apparently a significant number of the employees went to those two founders, and the two founders reconsidered how much they were keeping and how much they were not distributing among the rest of the people who built that company, and so there was a new redistribution of funds, right? But that they got the founders at some point flipped a switch. And their ethic became, okay, we're not in all this. We're not all in this together. We're all in it for me, right? And we need to guard against that. So the visionaries, the builders, they need to guard against that maybe natural tendency to be selfish about what's on the table. I'll stop with that, but there's a balance there. There's a balance. It doesn't. We don't have to vilify anybody who's at the front if they're handling well the distribution of all the benefits, and they can have the biggest share, but let's not make it like the 99% of the share, right? It can be a better balance in what we're doing culturally. Also, if I can go on one more second, Terry, about what we can do right now in the culture. Two things I can think of is we can stop idolizing the very rich. Bully from them if they're rich and they made it in fair terms, right? But we don't have to just make them the only idols, or even make them idols, right? We can dial back on that because that's not the only reward in life. We can find other ways to celebrate people in their various roles. One very specific example I can give is, at least in the legal profession, which something that mystifies me, is why do we publish? We publish annually the profits per partner (PPP), and honestly, it just mystifies me. Why? If I were an in-house counsel at where one of my clients, one Fortune 500 clients that I have a number of, if I were in-house counsel for that, I would be going down that list. And if any of those people worked for me, I'd probably be taking them off the list because they're making too much money. They're making several times more than I am. And it becomes an internal horse race between the partners, and that trickles downstream to the associates who are told, it's a plantation system. You're all paid very well. So that's, again, why AmLaw publishes that. I've just got no idea. They need to stop it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. I'm going to try to reframe something that we actually just had on a previous episode very recently by I'm going to try to do this, but I'm sure I'm going to have trouble doing with it. It's that like people like we have something that can be personally worthwhile for me if I do it. So for example, take the entry level, like the entry tests, SATs or GREs and stuff like that, right? Like there's this whole industry of people sitting at home preparing for those tests, and the system rewards those who spend an incredible amount of time preparing for it. But ultimately it's kind of wasteful. Like it's a lot of effort that goes into something that's kind of like a false system, and that like the best thing for me to do within that system is to work like crazy on the GRE. But is it a good thing for us as a society to invest a lot of energy in having that? Well, that's a different question, right? And so like I wonder how much of these external markers and some of these things that we pursue is that we have these selfish interests, because humans do have selfish interest, and that the problem is that when we all pursue them, it ends up creating an environment that's not good for anyone. But individually, it's better for me to pursue those things because it's going to comparatively help me get ahead. And that creates like kind of a systemic thing like that. And so I wonder, like, I don't know if you guys have thought about this, but, you know, do you think that there's there's a systemic thing that we need to change there? Or is it a question of me just deciding and being like, okay, I'm going to not write the GRE? Right? Because like, that's the problem. If I'm going to be the one grad student who doesn't write the standardized test because I think it's a bad system, then ultimately in that system, I'm going to be the big loser. So do you think it's a systemic decision we all have to make, or is it something that the individual takes upon themselves?
Yeah, it's a great question. And without being a cop-out, I think it is both. There are individual things we can and should do differently, and there are systemic things that tilt us in certain directions as well. I mean, what you're describing is like the prisoner's dilemma, right? Hey, if everybody works together, we will all get out. But that requires you to trust that everybody will work together, and it just breaks down, right? Well, but I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to take care of me, and then nobody gets out. So that's unfortunately kind of writ large in certain forms of capitalism. Charlie Munger talks about a similar thing. He gave an address. This was decades ago now, but to a group of money managers. So Charlie Munger is Warren Buffett's longtime business partner, right? Brilliant business mind, a multi-billionaire. And he, as one who speaks his mind pretty candidly, he just says things he just says things. But so he was talking to money managers, and he said, I was a bad example. Young Charlie Munger is a bad role model because he was trading, And so it's like trading, like studying for the GRE. Hey, there's a pot out there. There's so many seats at this college. I'm going to try and get one of those. There's a certain amount of money in this market. I'm going to try and get more of it over here for my firm. And he says too much of the nation's young ethical brain power is going into things that don't create value. And he's talking to money managers. So again, he's stepping on toes, but just this clamoring over a zero-sum pie, I guess, is ultimately not creating value. So whether it's a certain number of admissions at a school, certain number of dollars in the market, you're just trading back and forth again, and that's a frictional cost. Hey, same number of students would have gotten admitted even if none of them studied in advance, but if they just showed up and took it, like the same number of students get in, that's a waste. We don't believe that the world is a zero something. We think value can be added, value can be created with innovation, with creativity, with entrepreneurship. And there should be individual incentives to do exactly that. Hey, spot an opportunity and go for it. Find the value that's there and bring others along with you. But it requires a mindset shift. I think, in sports, somebody wins and somebody loses, and that mentality gets into us. Think, well, I don't want to lose. I want to win, which means somebody else has to lose. That's just kind of deeply ingrained in our habits, our thought patterns. But when we can see, hey, I can win and you can win, that's so much better. And it's not pie in the sky. It's hard, but it has been demonstrated throughout some centuries of capitalism that, wow, there have been things that have created immense amounts of value as well. So I guess I'm kind of rambling here, but I'd say, if you have a grow the pie mentality, great. Not I want this piece. No, I want that piece. No, I want that piece. Hey, grow the pie. There can be a bigger value that does generate value for me and others if we have that as the intention to begin with. So again, I'm rambling, but you asked about systemic. Yeah, we need that systemically too. Which comes back to us. Who are we voting for? Are we even paying attention to their economic proposals? A lot of things get in the news come election time. How many of them are, economically related? That just takes some work and some effort. But it's the work we need to do if we want people in office who then make policies that create a grow the pie scenario, as opposed to, well, I'll cut taxes for this group, and then the other party gets, well, I'll cut them for the other group. That's just trading back and forth. It's not looking at the whole in a way that moves us all forward.
Not to disagree with, I'm not disagreeing with anything Aaron said, and I hope I don't regret not giving this more thought, Terry. But as somebody who has suffered through the GRE, the LSAT, and who has sat through the patent bar exam, once you take the state bar exam, that's the ethics exam 1 day, 2 days worth of law exams. I'm exhausted with the law exams just thinking about them. So I've done a lot of testing. I have sometimes scored very well, sometimes not so much. I truly don't remember my LSAT score. It was not enough to get into Harvard, I promise you. So maybe those, because I'm not disqualified necessarily if I don't reach seriously, I don't remember the highest score anymore, but I'm not disqualified for not reaching that. I'm at another place where some other schools, I'll be acceptable to some other school. Maybe I'm disappointed that I don't get into school that I want to get into, and I have my disappointments in life. But it worked out. I wasn't not able to get into the law because I didn't score the very highest, right? So I think so far some of these testing requirements might be quite legit. I don't want to just be able to hold out a shingle and say I'm a doctor, right? Because I really do need to have I don't know if it's the smart so much. I think it's just the discipline and the subject matter knowledge and the information to go and do that practice. So that's different than a system that doesn't allow you to achieve it all, or creates, as Martin Luther King Jr. had mentioned, a facade that creates beggars, right? We don't want that system, that's for sure. But there's this balance between individual meritocracy and a level playing field. We should all have a level playing field, and these immutable characteristics that we spend so much time distinguishing each other over. I look forward to the day where we can continue to work through and past that, where we really are humans working with humans.
But it's not to belabor this too much, but it's like, I think the meritocracy aspect, like if we all just showed up and wrote the GRE, like that would be one thing, right? But it's like another question of like the arms race, and the arms race that maybe doesn't do anything productive. And like, you mentioned, Aaron, you mentioned sports. I think like the better parallel would be, in a sense, whatever sports performance, it is a bit of a zero-sum game, but I mean, it is also an advancement in training, because every time someone manages to shave off 0.1 of a second doing whatever, that's one thing. But then when you get into the doping arms race, it's another situation, right? Because it's that if one athlete dopes, then all of a sudden everyone else has to dope. And then we're in this kind of an arms race that's like basically just manipulating the human system. And then that's not really the point of it anymore. And I think, like, I'm not trying to say, okay, maybe someone should be rewarded for their ability to study for a standardized test, but it's more like the arms race aspect of it, that we end up doing something collectively that's not to all of our benefit.
Yeah. Well, I think the perfect example of that, unfortunately, is lobbying. Companies spend just massive amounts to get the law tilted, in their favor, rather than improving their product or service. It is not creating new value. It's just trying to, tilt things in their favor. That's a hard one to unwind. It's like asking turkeys to vote for Thanksgiving, but that is unfortunately an example of, think what could be done with all those funds, if we actually innovated, and competed rather than lobbied. Sorry, Terry, that you like that.
I loved it. Man, the turkeys, that was just too good.
Yeah, I wish that's not original to me. I think Luigi Zingales is an economist, but I do love that line.
I'm going to reuse that for sure.
I want to actually tug on something specific within the company section of the third section of the book. Okay, it seems like there's this idea, this conception of enough that we've talked about a couple times here for the individual, right? You apply that same conception of enough to a company, and that might work if it's if it's a sole proprietorship or a partnership, or a small corporation with very well-known shareholders. But how does that work when it's Microsoft and the shareholders are just everywhere and the CEO basically does what they want to do, and it's this concept of enough in growth, enough reach, enough revenue, enough profit. How does that apply to a multinational conglomerate, the point of which is growth?
Yeah, it's a great question. And what is the purpose of a corporation, right? Milton Friedman has his answer. And we don't have to chase all the legal trails, but that's not like codified in law, what Milton Friedman said. It's just common practice. It's very possible that shareholders could say, hey, we want our company to accomplish certain ends, financial or non-financial. There have been signs of hope here recently. You may have read some news like Exxon Mobil Corporation. They got new people on the board, who are at least going to let the shareholders vote on proposed reports on an advisory basis about environmental impacts. This is what shareholder proposals look like these days. But that's a huge company, but there was enough of a concerted effort from the distributed owners of shareholders to say, hey, we want this company that we do in fact own to at least think about these things. It's harder when ownership is that distributed, but it is possible that those things can happen.
This might be heresy, Jonathan, but it is endless growth is a fallacy. It's been said, if you think endless growth is a possibility, you're either an economist or a madman. And it's, we want growth for sure, but just like I don't want to just do nothing but eat all day long and become so incapacitated by the extra weight that I can't function, right? It's just maybe it's too rough of an analogy, but we don't have to just continually grow for the sake of growth. At some point, there are limits, and then we've seen it through history where the limits usually start to fracture from within, right? And things just break apart. So I think we can come to an understanding that we can have enough even in the largest of corporations. To our illustration and Aaron's point earlier, we suggested we offer a 6-month reserves, right? Capital reserves so even if you lost 50% of all revenue, you could still last an entire year with a 50% of reserves in place. And I think for the most part, COVID didn't even take us out that long, right? Yes, the world did stop. We absolutely had to figure out what to happen. But for those people who had reserves of 6 months or so, they survived. Anecdotally, from what I have understood and what I see, some have taken a little bit longer. But you don't need these enormous numbers and amounts of money that we think we need. It is a great deal, being unfettered, right? So I don't want to throw the word greed at anybody, and I'm not, but it's just this idea of having unfettered growth or growth for the sake of growth. I think that's probably unhealthy for us, and we see it in the metrics that we don't necessarily measure. But I just got off a committee call with the State Bar of Georgia, where I'm a member of the Attorney Wellness Committee, and we have a strong effort to help our 50,000 members in the state of Georgia to step back from substance abuse of all kinds. We've had a number of suicides in the state bar association. That's one of the things that aren't being measured is the wellness or well-being of the people in the marketplace, whether that's memberships in an organization or the consumer. How are economics affecting these kinds of things? And the pressures of our profession affect us in ways that growth that we're all searching for hurts. Hopefully I said that clearly enough, or concisely, but we've got to measure ourselves. It's
Yeah.
throttling
And
ourselves.
there are different kinds of corporations too. There's the scale and sell, as you said, Jonathan. There's a place for that, venture capital and startups. There are also corporations who, they want to pay a great dividend, and they want to pay it very reliably, very consistently, and their investors want them to pay it very reliably. They're not going to grow 30% a year, and they don't want to. That's not even what they desire to do at this point in their company's life cycle. And so, just knowing that there are different kinds of corporations, there can be different phases in a corporate life cycle, and different investors for those different phases is all, I think, part of where just the whole view is important. Somebody should be trying to grow, but not everybody. Some people need to make sure those dividends are getting paid, and are very consistent and reliable for people that depend on them.
I think we have time for like one more thing, and I wanted to give you guys a chance to do something, because I noticed throughout the book you're saying, hey, these are some ideas, email us to communicate with us, give us other ideas that you think would be valuable here. I'm just curious how much feedback you've received. How many emails have you gotten? Have you I know you talk about the wealth tax. Have people talked about other forms of taxation that would work? I know that you talk about some other things. Have people given you other ideas? I have a couple. We have a couple, but I want to hear what you've heard.
I have an ongoing conversation with 2 or 3 people who have read the book and are engaged. They're big fans of the first part and the second part, and then having a little bit more trouble with the third part, because that is where the rubber meets the road. And so we'll have dialogue about that. We'll discuss. So emails that have come in have been interesting. We'll make clear, if this is the opportunity to do this, no, we're not socialists. No, we're not communists. We're not Christian socialists, whatever that is. I'm not sure. But we're capitalists, but we just want to see the system done better. The lobbying has taken a couple of comments, like some people thinking, oh yeah, maybe I don't need to spend my money on lobbying. Maybe I need to spend my money in doing things where I don't need to convince politicians that I'm doing the right thing, because it's self-evident I'm doing the right thing. We had an interesting email the other day, which is now he posted as a review, and I appreciate that he was very transparent and said this is a difficult book, because it certainly got him thinking, and he agrees the conversation needs to start somewhere. He was having a little trouble seeing how we can take it to the ultimate steps, but as he said, it's got to start somewhere. And we can get some good traction here so far. But way back to our original thought of mutuality, yeah, we're in this world together. We would like other people's ideas and input. So what are some of yours?
So we've had a couple guests on recently. One was, I don't know if you know Guy Standing. He's a huge proponent of, and he's tested it, and he's an economist. He's tested basic income in lots of places. And as we've seen, as we've just discussed here, corporations get bigger and ownership get more distributed. A way to sort of support the people that aren't employed by those corporations, don't have the same kind of incomes, would be this. He would be upset with me if I said universal basic income, but this idea of a basic income, I think is a great idea. I think it's something we ultimately will have to employ, because things are getting more and more and more and more unequal.
Or a sovereign wealth fund also, something along the lines of Norway, let's say, who, was able to do that with their oil and gas reserves, right? But like, we have this, again, referring to Guy Standing, like we have this kind of a commons, right? As a society, like be it, again, my references will be Canadian, but like we have, resources, like we have water resources, we have electricity, we have all these kind of things that belong to all of us. And, we could create a sovereign wealth fund that ultimately we all, as citizens of the country, participate in, and that becomes a way of, giving people access to this, the ownership, right? The benefits of owning a stake in something, as opposed to, just being a random citizen who sees their share of the commons diminish every year.
Now, those are intriguing ideas. I mean, the Norwegian sovereign wealth fund is the one that's done well. So it's the one that you would want to to model on to pursue that idea.
Alaska's done well. Not really sovereign, but it's a state wealth fund. Alaska's.
That's a similar idea. Yeah.
I had a fellow student when I was at college who was an Alaskan citizen, and she was in college, and she got this check every year, and we're like, what is this? Like $2,000 out of nowhere. It's like, that's pretty cool. I had to work 40 hours a week in college. She had this check just for being a citizen. It was pretty awesome.
I'm attracted to the idea, Terry, just speaking personally, but because none of us had anything to do with the creation of that water, the timber, the minerals, or anything else. But we step into a ready-made world. We did not create any of this. It is the divine creation that is here. We're able to take a part of it. So what gives me a right, or my ancestors a right, to lay out four corners and say, this is mine, right? Yes, I get it. It was the bigger gun. But we should step back from that, and we should say, okay, this is here. This is ours. This is uniformly ours. How do we share it? Again, because I was not here to create, none of us were, to create that silver or that gold or that. That's different than maybe that's different if I've created a law firm and I'm, risked and I should get my percentage of the profits out of that. That's maybe the little thing I've created. Again, other people are helping me do it, but I'm attracted to that sovereign wealth fund idea.
I noticed neither one of you touched basic income. I might have hit a third.
Oh,
there.
There's so much to cover. We've just started.
I know, right?
Yeah. Not an unattractive idea. What if that were one of the metrics by which corporations counted their numbers, right? These are how many families we've helped out of either stay out of poverty or whatever, however that measure wants to go. But yeah, that could be something to do with their money.
Yeah, for corporations or for even societies as a whole. I guess I'm thinking about those two things together. A sovereign wealth fund done well that would support a basic income. Maybe that's where you're going with that too.
Yeah.
It's a really intriguing way to look at a bigger picture, right? And in the cases we've named here, Norway, oil and gas money, Alaska, oil and gas money out of a crisis, right? But seeing ahead, right? Hey, this won't last forever. So what's going to make it valuable, for a long time to come is certainly a partnership way to think. So I'm intrigued by those ideas.
And there's so many more, and we're out of time today. But this has been a wonderful conversation. Aaron, Paul, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate your presence and your answering some questions and actually disagreeing some. I think that's positive.
It is. We are friendly adversaries.